Okay, we're going to hear a little bit more about seagrass, and that's Fred Peterson again. He was tasked by the National Park Service to be looking at the nekton in seagrasses, and so his information now is going to be covering some of that. I've got some beach stain surveys and some other. So, Brad?
My whole life I've been following Chris Goldberg. Just once I'd like to do that.
So, I'm going to share with you some model work that we've done for the last 2 years since the breach. And the reason that we've done this, I'll make clear now. So, what I'm showing you are 5 locations where there was similar sampling done in 1995 and in 2001. And I have these little abbreviations here. So what I'm telling you is that there was throw trapping, CT, done here, 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 and here in 1995. There was beach stain and throw trapping that were done in 2001 at some of these locations. And the point of it is that these are 5 locations that bracket where we have the new inlet. So the thought was, what can we learn about how the inlet has been affecting animal use of these seagrasses? Now, there's some very interesting things right before we start. So Raposa in 2000, who did their work in 1995, they did it in eelgrass. They did it in eelgrass here, 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 here. And I can tell you that when we started our study, there is no seagrass here. Nothing. There's no eelgrass here, and there's no eelgrass here. So there's been big changes. And what I'm going to show you going on, let me key you in. This is Sailor's Haven, Barrett Beach, Watch Hill, Old Inlet, and Pattersquash. And those are the names that I'm going to be using going forward. Okay? I'm going to show you throw trap data. I'm going to show you beach stain data and some trawling data. These were done with a small 16-foot otter trawl off the back of a small boat, and trawls that were done in no deeper than 3.5 feet. Right? So done between 2.5 and 3.5 feet in seagrass with present. So here's our sampling. These are all based on what the protocols were in those previous papers. We're doing the same sampling that they had done. I want to point out, the throw trapping obviously is going to be limited to depth, at roughly 28 centimeters, because this can't be above the water column. And this was 2.5 to 3.5 feet, and the beach stain was 50 feet offshore coming up onto the beach. Now, I'm showing you throw trap data right here. So this is the places where there's seagrass, because we only throw trap in seagrass. And I'm telling you that there was, this is per square meter, because that's how much area you cover in throw trap. And Barrett Beach, Watch Hill, this is all west. We saw a lot more stuff than we did when we went to the inlet and to the east. So now let's look and see what kinds of stuff, what drives these numbers. Well, this is based on seagrass. So dark green is rupia, and no one's had eelgrass in these sites. Most of the stuff is found in the rupia. Well, what is that? This is the same plot I just showed you in the previous graph. And what this is showing you the number of shrimp and mud sails. We found lots of stuff, but those numbers are really driven by shrimp. We focused on the shrimp. Lots of shrimp, lots of shrimp, lots of stuff, lots of stuff. No shrimp, no shrimp. Right? And so these numbers are really driven by the shrimp densities that we had in those throw traps. Again, shrimp densities in seagrass. Now, this is looking at changes by the, like I showed you before, shrimp, none. And this is the fish that we got in the throw trap. I'm trying to show you is that as we went from the inlet over this area, we found many more fish in our throw trap than we did previously. And my suspicion is the reason we didn't find as many shrimp is because we found a lot more fish in those throw traps. Looking at the trawls and the beach stains. So the trawls we saw increase only for this last year. And in the beach stains we saw a similar pattern of increase. As, this is where we have the most fish. Now I'm going to do a side-by-side comparison. I'm back to throw trap. Last year, this year. Barrett Beach, looking at rupia. You see that we had a lot more this year than we did the previous year. That pattern is followed as you go to Watch Hill. A lot more at Inlet as well, but Pattersquash, this is now between the Inlet and Center Morches, we see a slight decline in the stuff that was present there. Again, our throw trap data, that would be part of my thinking on this. If we do year-by-year comparisons, see a big jump over here, last year. Again, our beach things reflect the same thing that we were seeing in our trawls. Now, this is the kind of stuff we're getting. This is the throw trap data. At the inlet, we're getting things like sea bass, the cod, and we got some tropicals in those throw traps and butterfly fish. What about those trawls? What are we getting in these? These numbers in the prints are kind of the numbers we got in the trawls here. We got tropicals. One thing I want to point out, I was really excited. We got lionfish in sea grass. He was only about this big. We got them. The point is, we got a lot of things that we would not have expected to see in the area of the old breach prior to the breach being there, which was mentioned by Bob just moments ago. And again in the beach thing, kind of see some of the stuff that is there. Lots of stickleback using that seagrass habitat. Okay, now I'm talking to you about fish. Those three different techniques we use. I also want to talk to you about crabs. It's very interesting. Bob and we should talk more. But I always feel good when I hear someone say something that I was going to say later on. So I want to go through these three different sampling strategies looking at mobile crabs now. Right? Taking away the fish. Here's the throw traps, and here is the crab density for the throw trap. Here's the crab density on the trawls, very different than what we saw in the throw trap. And there's like nothing, no pattern going on here in the beach thing. Well, let's just look at these individually for a moment. So if we look at the throw trap, we look only at blue crabs, you'll see that there's really no difference. If we look at the mud crab densities are really what's driving that pattern in those throw traps. Very grass resonant. So that's the total number of crabs. That's the mud crab. That pattern's really being driven by the mud crabs we got in those throw traps. Well, let's go down then to the trawls. You notice that this year, not last year, but this year, we got lots of lady crabs in those trawls. 100 or so per trawl. We only found it to the west of the breach. This is the total crab abundance for the trawl. Lady crab, total crab. Right? That pattern is driven entirely by the lady crab population. Well, what about the beach things then? Well, that is showing you the lady crab population for the beach thing. This is showing you the blue crab population. The blue crabs here. This is showing you the mud crabs. And this was the whole pattern. So you have to look at it and say, here were those lady crabs, here were the mud crabs, blue crabs, here were the mud crabs. So now, you break it apart by species specific, you start to see the pattern based on distance from that breach. So, from our faunal nexus study so far, the things that I would point out is that our shrimp abundances are really, really high to the west of the breach, and they drop significantly as the breach and further on towards the Morris Inlet. The densities continue to increase at the breach and move towards, and this year we had significantly more fish caught in our sampling strategies than we did in the previous year. And we have a number of tropicals that were collected. The faunal densities are higher in Rufia, but that's really driven because the shrimp density populations are greater in that Rufia. The faunal density dramatically, significantly increased between 2013 and 2014 in all of the sites that we saw, except for Morges where there was a slight drop, but it wasn't significant. And our crab densities at the 5 sites are driven by species-specific differences that we see at those 5 locations. So that's all I have.
them in the same sequence every time?
You mean from year to year? Or?
No, you started to the west in the morning and went east.
No, we did not.
How did you do it?
Based on wind direction. So sometimes we'd start over at Center Morches because the wind was out of the north. We'd work our way to crummy weather and we'd start that way. And some days we'd start in the middle. So you know, and also one thing to keep note, we did not do all of our sampling on a single day. What I mean is we didn't go to one site and do all the throw traps on that day, right, at one site, and then next week do all the same. We would basically intersperse the sampling over a 4-week period. So this was basically done in August. It bled a little bit in September.
Yeah, I was just wondering, these are very shallow water sites.
Very, very shallow.
So, you know, there could be movement in and out of them that if you sampled in a regular pattern each time, you might be missing.
I thought it was interesting that 2013 we saw a lot more blue crabs than we did in 2014. I thought that was interesting. And in 2014 we saw an explosion of lady crabs that we didn't see in the previous year. That marches up well with Bob's. But these are very shallow water areas. Yeah.
Brad, so you didn't talk too much about comparisons to the
Yes.
earlier data to the
You're correct.
13 and 14. And there's going to be an enormous amount of, you know, year-to-year variability, and the early data sets were just collected, you know, in 1 year. And here you have 1 more year of data to go with the current data. But what do you are you still planning on trying to do some sort of a
Yes.
change analysis?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd like to point out that my coworker on this is Bob Serrato, Mr. Statistical Genius. So yes, we are. And of course, I was trying to just give my slides to Bob to give a presentation. Cornelia told me that I had to present different than what Bob's work is. So the point that I didn't do any comparison so far with what happened in the previous year before the breach, and that's where I think the really cool story is. But there are a number of issues that, you know, Bob raised a couple of things to think about just between 2013 and 2014. Think about the differences between 1995 and 2014. And we're going to have to scope in there. So it will be complicated, but I think that that's pretty cool story to see. Already going through the list from the Reposa paper, looking at the kind of fish species that they were collecting in their sites, I think it's very interesting comparing to what we're seeing on the street. Stuff that we're doing now. But I haven't done this.
Sounds like you're going to need a statistical genius to make something.
I was just going to ask you about the numbers. So those are just the raw numbers. But they have to, for the different methods, how do they get corrected for effort and for area?
Very excellent question. So the throw trap is 1 square meter, always is the same, right? The seines were always 50 feet from shore and drawn in, so it's a fixed area that's being covered. And the trawls were all 4-minute trawls over grass, except for the Sailor's Haven, where there was no grass. We did trawls there, but there wasn't any grass for us to trawl over there. Those were all 4-minute trawls. So we basically, what I showed you was abundances, because I kept, you know, in essence, they're still apples to apples. But of course, moving forward, we want to get that into a per square meter kind of density to make comparisons, particularly with the other studies. Yes.
I might have missed it because my eyes are a little bit from this distance, but what were your numbers in limulus? Maybe in the zero.
I didn't get any. Not a single one.
Any of the trawls? Any of the seines?
Not a single one. And I thought for sure we'd get some of the trawls. Right. And it'll be interesting because the talk coming after me, you'll hear trawl data. And I'm sure they got them. I just think that I'm in very warm, very shallow water. In August. Well, yes, in August. That's correct.
That still wouldn't exclude juveniles necessarily. So, but not so much.